Letter I Steam Voyage to Amsterdam, Rubens' Picture of the Descent from the Cross, Various Misadventures, Liege, Cologne, Koblenz, Mayence, Frankfurt by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. I have delayed writing hitherto, for this is our first Stasian. I know not of what clay those persons are made who write on board steamers, or before going to bed, when they reach an inn, after a long day's journey. I rather disbelieve in such achievements. A date or reference may be put down, but during a voyage I am at first too interested and then too tired, and at night, on arriving, I confess, supper and the ceremonial of retiring to rest are exertions almost too much for me. I cannot do more. And then we have traveled amidst a hurricane of misfortunes, money and other property disappearing under the malignant influence of the Belgian railroad and some rogue at the hotel at Liege. Our missing luggage has been restored, but we have found no remedy for the loss of our money. £16 were seized upon at one fell swoop. Imagine such an accident happening when we were abroad 2 years ago. At present, it is not pleasant, but it is not fatal as it would then have been. Our last week in England was most delightfully spent at the seat of a friend near Southampton, on the skirts of the New Forest. A little quiet sailing in a yacht, drives in a beautiful neighborhood, strolling about the grounds, the rites of good old English hospitality varied the day. Our host was all kindness, and added the crowning grace of being really sorry when we departed. His saddened countenance, as the engine whistled and we were whirled towards London, gave us the flattering assurance that we were regretted, and we sincerely returned the compliment. We spent a day or two in London, taking leave of a few old friends, and on Sunday, 12th of June, we embarked on board the Wilberforce for Antwerp. I hate and dread the sea, having suffered, oh, what suffering it is! How absorbing, how degrading, how without remedy, and then to wish for terra firma only so much as the feet will stand upon, thus no longer to be the abject victim of the antipathetic element. A speck of rock, 1 foot by one, would not that suffice to stand upon and be still? I speak of times past. The mighty power had, when trusting to its awful mutability, shewn itself merciful as great as I crossed and recrossed from N to Dover in 1840. But this was a longer voyage, and as we steamed down the river, the wind was directly adverse and felt strong. The sea looked dreary, and the evening set in gray, cold, and unpleasant. I was the last passenger that kept on deck. About 10 o'clock, the increasing spray drove me down. However, I escaped the doleful extremity of seasickness, and slept till morning, when the slow waters of the Scheldt received us. The sun was bright, but nothing can adorn with beauty the low, nearly invisible banks of an almost Dutch river, and there was no busy craft to enliven the scene. It is strange to think how a scene, in itself uninteresting, becomes agreeable to look at in a picture, from the truth with which it is depicted, and a perfection of coloring which at once contrasts and harmonizes the hues of sky and water. Though it may be done 1,000 times, still English people must always experience a strange sensation when they disembark on a foreign strand, and find every familiar object startlingly changed. But if strange, it is very pleasing. I have a passionate love of traveling. Add to this, I suffer in my health, and can no longer apply to my ordinary employments. Traveling is occupation as well as amusement, and I firmly believe that renewed health will be the result of frequent change of place. Besides, what can be so delightful as the perpetual novelty, the exhaustless current of new ideas suggested by traveling? We read, to gather thought and knowledge. Traveling is a book of the Creator's own writing, and imparts sublimer wisdom than the printed words of man. Were I exiled perforce, I might repine, for the heart naturally yearns for home. But to adorn that home with recollections, to fly abroad from the hive, like the bee, and return laden with the sweets of travel, scenes which haunt the eye, wild adventures that enliven the imagination, knowledge to enlighten and free the mind from clinging, deadening prejudices, a wider circle of sympathy with our fellow creatures. These are the uses of travel, for which I am convinced every one is the better and the happier. We landed on the quay at Antwerp and walked to the hotel, a long walk under a hot sun. After refreshing ourselves by a toilette, we hastened to the cathedral, for we had no time to spare, to view the Descent from the Cross, the chef d'oeuvre of Rubens. Several people were being admitted as we arrived, but with a rudeness of gesture and tone that far surpassed Westminster, the door was pushed to, and held jealously ajar till we had paid a few sous, the price of entrance. The interior is spacious and lofty, and remarkable for its simplicity, and its being totally unencumbered by screens of wood or stone. The Descent from the Cross is a very fine picture. You may remember that Sir Joshua Reynolds, in his lectures, mentions the boldness of the artist in enveloping the dead body with a white cloth. A painter, less sure of his powers, would have relieved the livid hues of death by a dark background. The white sheet, under the pencil of Rubens, contrasts yet more fearfully with the livid tints of the corpse. This is all we saw of Antwerp, this half hour spent in the lofty nave and the dim aisles of the cathedral. Do not despise us. Some day I mean to make a tour of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Holland. But we found it quite impossible to combine sightseeing at the commencement of our journey with our intention of proceeding as far as Italy. You know what it is that enables the tourist to loiter on his way, and you know how slenderly we are provided with the same. I have read somewhere the remark of a French lady, expressive of her astonishment at the English mania for traveling. She understood, she said, rich people with comfortable carriages amusing themselves thus. But how women who can command the comforts of an ordinary English house could leave the same, and by diligence and voiture, harassed and fatigued, should find pleasure in exposing themselves to 1,000 annoyances and privations, surprised her beyond measure. I have traveled in both ways. To undertake the last requires a good deal of energy and an indefatigable love of seeing yet more and more of the surface of this fair globe, which, like all other passions or inclinations, must spring naturally from the heart, and cannot be understood except by those who share it. After having been confined many a long year in our island, I broke from my chains in 1840 and encountered very rough traveling. I did not find it more fatiguing than the more luxurious species, and enjoyed as much as I had ever done its pleasures. Now I have set out again, my choice being between staying at home and traveling as I could. I preferred very far the latter. I should prefer it tomorrow. Still, I do not deny that I did repine much, on various occasions, that I could not linger longer on my way, and visit 1,000 places left unvisited. I hope to go to them another time. What I did see is all gain, and I ought rather to rejoice in the spirit of enterprise that enabled me to see so much, than to grumble at the smallness of the means that forced me to see so little. We returned to dine at the table d'hôte, and were then hurried into the omnibus, waiting to take us to the railway. I have always avoided this mode of reaching the terminus in England, as too full of confusion, and I cannot tell why I changed my notion on the subject here abroad. I repented heartily afterwards, and renewed my resolve always to reach the station in a private conveyance. Just as we left the hotel, our 3 passports were put into our hands, one apiece. In the hurry I dropped mine, the first loss of a day, rendered memorable by many. On our arrival, everybody in the various omnibuses that arrived at the same time at once went mad from hurry and confusion. Loss the second occurred here. 1,000 forgot her handbasket, containing a lady's maid's treasures for a journey. Many things of English birth were gone irreparably. A noisy crowd surrounded one window of the station at the terminus, eager for tickets, as if the train would set off without them. Before another door was piled all the luggage brought by all the omnibuses. It was only admitted piecemeal, and the selection of the articles belonging to each traveler was a scene of indescribable confusion. We none of us understood German, confession of shame. I had taken lessons in the winter, but my health prevented my making any progress. French was of little avail. We had divided our forces to master the difficulties we encountered. K went for the tickets, P with the luggage, and I remained to wonder and expect. After a time the noise ceased, the crowd disappeared, a bell rung, I had got my ticket, and the gates being open, I walked into the yard. I found the carriages nearly full and ready to start. It seemed very odd. My companions had left me and had gone to look after the luggage. I saw nobody, so I took my seat in a carriage, and in a few seconds we started. The carriages are inconvenient, bearing no similitude, indeed, to carriages, but are small rooms or cells, boxed off into 8 seats and placed on a sort of platform. One merit they possessed, we were not locked in, there was no door, and the egress from the front was easy to the platform, and that was scarcely raised from the ground. The carriages were very full, the heat excessive, and several unruly children did not add to our comfort. At Malines, I think it was, we were to be transferred to another train, the one in which we commenced our journey going on to Brussels. Changing carriages is always a tiresome operation. I alighted in the middle of a large square, and was glad to find my companions safely assembled. Our luggage was turned out here, and, as we waited some time before we were taken up again, we amused ourselves with examining our property. With dismay, we discovered that 2 cloaks and a carpet-bag were missing. Certainly, for travelers somewhat experienced, our conduct appeared disgraceful. P, who had passed the luggage, had witnessed that all was weighed, but he had not been allowed to remain in the weighing room to see the things off, and his want of German had rendered the task difficult. On our arrival at Liege, another scene of confusion at the unloading ensued. It must be said, however, that their method was good, and the noise arose from the numbers of travelers and their exceeding vociferations. On weighing the luggage, they pasted a piece of paper on each article, inscribed with a number, the same number for all the goods belonging to one name, and to this is added the number of articles. Thus all our things were marked, 21, and we had a paper given us that gave us a claim to 9 articles marked, 21. The men, as they unload, cry out the number pasted on the articles, and the passengers, with their papers in their hands, claim their own. 7 only, however, appeared for us. The cloaks in the carpet bag were missing. Waiting, in hopes that these might at last be forthcoming, detained us among the last. The omnibuses were nearly full, no carriages, nor post horses for the carriages on the train, nor any other means of getting to Liege were to be found. We got places, and we heard afterwards that the confusion in some of the omnibuses had arisen to a scuffle. This we escaped. Murray's handbook was our guide, usually an admirable one. Among other useful information, none is more satisfactory to the traveler than to know the best hotel in a town. Murray directed us to the Aigle Noir, which we found large, clean, and pleasant.